and welcome back once again to After the Credits. So I finally got around to seeing something a little bit newer. This, again, been out for a little while now, but closer towards the end of November as opposed to the middle of November like the last couple that I did. Or even October like one of them was, I believe. So this one came out towards the end of last month. I know I'm a couple weeks late to it, but as I mentioned before, financial issues. I don't make a big enough living off of doing YouTube videos. I do have to maintain a day job. Unfortunately, I don't know if I mentioned before, I'm actually between day jobs right now. Not that I'm not looking, but just nothing's come up yet, which is why I've been having a lot of financial struggles. I have bills to pay, and unfortunately, sometimes this stuff has to take a back seat to that. But I did finally go see something fairly new, and that was Allied. So, what did I think of Allied? I feel as though I've seen at least half of this movie before. Again, not sure where. Maybe it's a remake of an older film that I'm just sort of remembering, but I'm not 100% sure. But the ending of this movie seemed extremely familiar to me. So this is basically kind of three movies kind of pieced together to make one excessively long movie. It's not excessively long, though. It's only 2 hours long. But let's say the first 45-ish minutes, 50 minutes is one movie. Then you have like a 20-minute section in the middle, which leads into another 45 to 50-minute movie at the end. So the movie starts with the first act, which is, I forget the main lady's name, but she is a French resistance operative during World War II who has infiltrated the Nazi camp and, under the guise of a Nazi sympathizer. And in order to ensure her cover, the Canadian Air Force, which I believe was still part of British colonies at that point, they might actually still be. I'm not 100% sure on the whole British tie anymore. But regardless of all that, I don't know all the political histories of Canada and Great Britain and all that. I believe they used to have ties to the UK. Probably not anymore. Maybe they never did. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But Brad Pitt's character is a commander in the Canadian Air Force who I guess is stationed in London, and the Allied forces send him in to pose as this woman's husband so that she doesn't get outed and they can continue the mission that she started. So he goes in posing as her husband, and the overall thing is that they're leading up to this one main event where all these main German dignitaries are going to be basically generals in the Nazi army, and they plan to assassinate all of them at this party. So that's the first act of the movie, is them leading up to him portraying her husband, getting to learn certain things about, what she's told everyone about him and all that, and trying to play into this character to lead up to this assassination, and then whether or not they pull off the assassination. Cue the second act of the movie, the small 20-minute segment. Spoilers, they pull off the assassination. And I guess over the course of time of them getting to know each other, they fell in love or whatever. So since their mission is accomplished, he goes, since you're done here, why don't you come back to London with me and we'll get married. So she comes back to London, and at first there's an issue where they have to vet her and make sure she's okay, she's not a spy, blah, blah, blah. So they go through all that. Finally, she gets approved. Yep, she's cool. She can come to London. You guys can get married. So they're together. They get married. They have a child. About a year or two goes by or whatever. And suddenly we go into the third act of the movie where he's called into the office of the branch of the military force that vetted his wife and said she was okay. She wasn't a spy. Allowed her in, and then they call him back in and say, well, we think your wife's a spy, so we're going to have you perform an action, and if this information gets back, we know she's a spy, and then, she'll be executed for treason. And the thing that bothered me most about this part of the movie is not once does Brad Pitt say, your office is the one that vetted her, because it's the same, it's like Section V or something like that, or Z, whatever, and they're the ones who vetted her. Not once does he mention, hey, your office vetted her, why didn't you catch this shit a year ago or 2 years ago. It's never brought up. So basically, now he's suspicious of his wife, so he's kind of watching everything she's doing and acting different around her and whatnot. And he gets to the point where he still loves her and he wants to prove that it's not what they think. So he sets out on his own investigation to find out if this woman is really the woman that she claimed to be when they got married, or if she's a spy that replaced the woman who she was supposed to be. Even though he's been told not to investigate, he goes out and does it anyway. It all boils down to, in the end, finding out whether or not she was or wasn't the spy and wrapping it up. And again, I'm not going to spoil the ending because for a long time you're not sure which way it's going to go, and you're like, okay, either she is or she isn't. But as I'm watching it, I'm like, I know how this is going to play out. I know how this character's involved. I know how this character's involved. I know how this character's involved. I've seen this part of the movie before. The whole, is she or isn't she a spy? And for the life of me, I cannot remember where I've seen it before, what movie it was. I'm assuming it's from some old movie. The whole first act of the movie doesn't seem familiar. The second half seems like it's been a movie in its own before. If you happen to know what movie it is, then you probably already know how this is going to end. But if not, then, like I said, it keeps you kind of in suspense of whether she is or she isn't. So there is that. My other biggest downfall with it is it's a period piece, and I'm only into certain period pieces. I'm not real big on war films. I'm not real big on westerns. I'm not real big on movies that take place during those times. Probably one of the only westerns I really enjoy is the third Back to the Future film. And even then I was like, really, it's a western? After we came from the future of 2015, now we're doing a western, but they made that western interesting. Occasionally there are westerns that I find interesting. Most of the older ones, I don't. World War I or World War II films, again, things placed during that time I can get into something from back in that era, but if it revolves around the war that's going on at the time, it's just not my cup of tea. Same with like mobster films, yeah, some of them are okay. Most of them I just haven't really got into. I've never seen any of the Godfather films. It's on my list of things to watch someday, never seen them. But then you got other things like Goodfellas and Casino and things like that. Those I like. But, like other things, I just have trouble getting into. So yeah, this being a period piece kind of affected my attention span to it, because yeah, there's this semi-interesting story going on in the third act, but at the same time it's revolving around World War II, and I just really couldn't give a crap less. And again, not to put down the war, it was a bad time in history. There's not sure how many veterans are still around from the Second World War. I'm pretty sure all the ones from the First World War are gone. I think the last few survivors of the Second World War might be on their way out, if there's any left. Yeah, there was a time when this stuff happened, and it's a important part of our history. I'd rather read about it or see like a documentary about something on like the History Channel than see a movie about it. Same thing with like even going as far back as Captain America: The First Avenger. They put so much of that into the past, I just didn't care about that film. I said it in the review for that film. I wished it would have kind of had a parallel back and forth where, it showed Steve Rogers back during the war and then showed Steve Rogers now after he's been found, and him dealing with a similar situation both times, and what he's dealing with in the current time keeps reflecting back to how he handled something in the past to kind of give you this didn't work back then, so let's try something different now type of thing, or it would have worked if it hadn't been for this, so now we know how to fix it in the current time. And that, I think, would have improved Captain America: The First Avenger quite a bit, as opposed to just having to be a full World War II piece and then, here's like 10 minutes of him in the current time. But that's a different movie. Basically, the only reason I brought that up, like I said, is to make the point of period pieces around the wartime just don't interest me. So I'm trying to rate this movie without that bias, but again, that bias is there. It was an interesting movie. It kept you intrigued, other than the fact that I feel that I knew what was going to happen because I'd somehow seen it before. But for the most part, it kept you interested enough to keep watching it, but at the same time, all the war propaganda stuff that was going on within it was just kind of like, okay, I get why this is here, but do we need so much of it? Can we just move on and get to the next part of the story? So based on that, what would I give it as far as a star rating? As much as I want to say it's just a middle-of-the-road movie and give it a 3, I'm not going to. Again, like I said, I do have to give it a little bit of a downgrade because of how much the period piece kind of interrupted the flow of the movie for me. Especially if you go back and watch like my review of Fury. I went into that thinking I wasn't going to like it because it was a war film. It actually turned out to be a really good movie. I don't remember what I rated it, but I would rate that one still to this day higher than I would rate this. And both starred Brad Pitt. So, based on that bias towards the period piece, based on the 2-hour movie basically being two separate movies kind of crammed together into one, and the fact that I feel I saw it before, so the suspense was a little bit dead for me, even though it was still interesting, I would probably give this one like a 2.5. It's not quite middle of the road for me. It bumps down a little bit. But, like I said, there is that bias there, so if you want to say it's a 3 or higher, that's your opinion. My personal opinion was it was a 2.5, and I honestly almost bumped it down to a 2, but again, I'm trying to eliminate that bias in myself towards the aspects of this movie that I didn't like to give it a more fair review, which is why it's at a 2.5 instead of a 3. So there you have it. That's my review of Allied. Again, as always, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Links are down there in the description. Hit that bell up there. Make sure you're getting alerts when I put out new videos. And until next time, we'll see you after the credits.